The thing most likely to wreck your retirement probably isn't what you're protecting against. Most people spend decades asking, what should I do to retire well? And that feels productive. Save more, invest wisely, pick the right date. But Charlie Munger, one of the greatest investors who ever lived, said something that cuts right through all that. He said, invert, always invert. In other words, don't just ask what leads to success. Ask what leads to failure. Then avoid that. He had another line that I love even more. He said, all I want to know is where I'm going to die, so that I'll never go there. That's dark, but that's the point. And I recently read about a concept that applies that exact mindset directly to retirement planning. And once you see it, it changes how you look at almost every decision that you've been making. I recently read about a concept called the rule of retirement inversion. And the core idea is simple. A strong retirement plan doesn't just chase the ideal outcome. It starts by identifying the things most likely to wreck your retirement. Then it works backwards from those failure points. So let's walk through it. Think about Richard Feynman for a second. He was one of the physicists who was brought in to investigate the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster. And while everyone else was looking at what should have worked, Feynman started asking, well, what could have failed? And he ran a simple test with a rubber O-ring and a glass of ice water. He showed that it was elasticity in the cold. That was it. That was the failure point that nobody had prioritized. See, inversion. Not what went right in our processes, but where was the weak link? That's the approach that I want you to bring to retirement. Because here's a number that stopped me. 62% of retirees said that they wish they could change something about how they planned for retirement. More than half. And these aren't people who didn't try. Most of them did the work, they saved, they planned, but they were optimizing for the best case and under-preparing for the likely case. So instead of asking what your ideal retirement looks like, let's flip it. What does a retirement that quietly falls apart actually look like? And how do you make sure that you're not walking into it? The first place that retirement quietly falls apart is lifestyle. And this one gets underestimated almost every time. See, most people have a picture of retirement in their head. Maybe it's travel, maybe it's being close to family, maybe it's finally having time. And those things are real. But the structure of daily life, that's something else entirely. In the article that I was reading, a financial planner named Christopher High said that retirement removes structure, purpose, deadlines, even in your inbox. And into that void, if you're not intentional, what fills it is regret, resentment, or just unproductive habits. And that's not dramatic. That's just what happens for a lot of people. Not because they're weak, but because nobody warned them that identity doesn't automatically travel with you into retirement. I mean, you've spent 30, 40 years being someone who does something. And then one day, well, you're not doing it anymore. And that transition, nobody talks about it like they should. If you're finding this kind of thinking useful, go ahead and subscribe. This channel is about real retirement decisions, the trade-offs, the surprises, the psychology of all of it, not just the math. So here's the inversion question on lifestyle. What does a retirement look like where I feel lost, purposeless, or like I made a mistake? I mean, what conditions create that? Because if you can name those conditions, you can start building against them now. And the same thing applies to where you live. Aging in place sounds great. Most people say that they want it, but very few actually prepare their home before they need to. And then a health event happens, and suddenly the house that felt like a home became a logistical problem. We're talking about wide doorways, grab bars, first floor access. These aren't fun things to think about. But the inversion question is, what happens if I need these things and don't have them? And if you're thinking about relocating, moving for taxes or weather or a lower cost of living, that can absolutely work. But the failure version of that story is someone who moves somewhere that they never actually lived day to day. And they realize 6 months later that they don't have community, that their medical care is different than what they expected, and they're farther from family than they thought they'd feel. So test it before you commit. That's the inversion move. All right, now here's where it gets a little bit more complicated. See, most people are good savers, people who've done the right thing for decades, and they run into a different problem in retirement. They don't know how to spend. It sounds almost funny, but it's real. And the psychology that made you a good saver works against you as a spender. You've trained yourself to hold back. And so in early retirement, a lot of people underspend. They hold on to assets longer than they need to because the habit of accumulation runs so deep. And this matters way more than it sounds because retirement spending isn't flat. There's a pattern that researchers call the retirement spending smile. Spending tends to be higher in early retirement. You're active, you're traveling, you're doing the things that you delayed all those years. Then it dips in the middle years. Then it rises again later, driven almost entirely by healthcare. That pattern means that your cash flow strategy can't be static. It has to move with your life. Reviewing it once and filing away isn't enough. And the inversion question here is, what does my retirement look like if I never adjust my drawdown strategy? What if I'm too conservative early and then face required minimum distributions, RMDs, that push you into a higher tax bracket later because, well, I let tax deferred accounts grow unchecked? That's a specific avoidable problem, but only if you see it coming. Now, healthcare, that's where the real surprises live. Nearly 40% of retirees say that health and dental costs are higher than they expected. That's not a small number. And most of them had Medicare. And sure, Medicare is real coverage, but it doesn't cover everything. Rehab stays, dental work, vision, long-term care, these are gaps that add up fast. And the inversion question isn't, will I be healthy? Most people hope they will be. The question is, what happens to my retirement plan if I'm not? What happens if I need extended rehabilitation that Medicare doesn't fully cover? What does a long-term care need, even a moderate one, actually cost in today's dollars? If you don't have a real answer to that, the gap in your plan is there whether you've looked at it or not. And this connects to something that almost never comes up in retirement planning conversations: supporting adult children. There's a survey that found that half of parents are providing financial support to their adult kids. Average amount, around $1,474 a month. Well, look, that's not judgment, that's love. But it's also a quiet drain on retirement security that a lot of people never account for when they're building their plan. The inversion question here, what does my retirement look like if I'm regularly supplementing my kids' finances for years longer than I expect? Is my plan built to absorb that? Or does it slowly hollow out the foundation? And then there's estate planning, which most people treat as something to deal with eventually. A significant percentage of Americans still don't have a will. And even among those who do, beneficiary designation mistakes are incredibly common. See, the beneficiary listed on a retirement account or a life insurance policy overrides whatever your will says. So, if you named an ex-spouse on a 401k 20 years ago and you never updated it, that's where the money goes, not to who you intended. Assets stuck in probate, confusion among heirs, unintended tax consequences, these are all real outcomes, and are almost entirely avoidable with basic updated estate documents. The inversion move is simply asking, what happens to my assets and my family if I do nothing differently than what I've done? Here's what I want to leave you with. Retirement planning isn't really about building a perfect picture of the future. It's about reducing the number of things that can quietly go wrong. The threats are mostly known: lifestyle drift, overspending or underspending, healthcare surprises, supporting family longer than planned, estate gaps. These aren't rare disasters, they're common patterns. And Munger was right. Avoiding the obvious mistakes is often more valuable than trying to engineer a brilliant outcome. So flip the question. Instead of only asking what your ideal retirement looks like, ask what the failure version looks like. What are the conditions that create it? And what are you doing right now to make sure that you're not walking straight into them? That question alone will do more for your retirement than most strategies will. Now, before you go, the next video that you need to watch is one that I'd call essential if you're anywhere close to retirement age. It's all about the financial and legal moves that you need to make before you even announce that you're retiring. Don't tell your employer, your colleagues, or sometimes even your family until these things are done. It's one of those videos where people say, I wish I'd seen this earlier. So I'll leave the link down below. And remember, retirement isn't just a math problem. Thanks for watching, my friends. I'll see you in the next one.